The Problem of Thor Bridge. Somewhere in the vaults of Cox and Company Bank at Charing Cross, there lies a metal dispatch box bearing my name. Dr. John H. Watson, late surgeon of the Indian Army. The box, worn and battered from being carried from place to place over the years, is crammed full with papers. And in those papers, as my readers may well imagine, are the records of many curious cases in which Sherlock Holmes was engaged at different times. Some of these cases are, in truth, not especially interesting, and they ended in such complete failure that they scarcely merit being told. Though an unsolved mystery may hold a certain fascination for students of the subject, it rarely captures the attention of the ordinary reader. One such inconclusive affair concerned Mr. James Phillimore, who returned to his house to fetch his umbrella and then vanished in the most inexplicable fashion. Hardly less remarkable was the story of the cutter Alicia, which sailed into a small bank of spring mist one morning and was never heard from again, neither ship nor crew. Another case of note involved the well-known journalist and duelist Isadora Persano, who was discovered staring fixedly at a matchbox before him, his mind utterly deranged. It was said that the strange worm inside that box belonged to no species known to science. In addition to these unresolved matters, there exists another class of cases involving the secrets of certain distinguished families, secrets which, if published, would cause no small sensation among the upper circles of society. Indeed, even the suggestion of revealing such private affairs would be improper. Sherlock Holmes himself has often declared that at the first opportunity he will separate these records from the others and see them destroyed. Beyond these two groups, however, there remains a third category of cases. They are interesting enough in their own way, yet I have refrained from publishing them out of respect for a man whose reputation among the public I would be loath to damage. In some of these adventures, I was personally present and can therefore recount them firsthand. In others, I was either absent or played so minor a role that they could only properly be told by a third party. The case I am about to relate, however, I witnessed with my own eyes. On a cold October morning, as I dressed, I watched from my window how the last leaves of the plane tree in the garden behind our house were being torn away and scattered by the wind. As I made my way downstairs to breakfast, I expected to find my friend Holmes in a rather gloomy mood, for like all great artists, he was strongly influenced by his surroundings. Yet, contrary to my expectations, Holmes appeared in excellent spirits and had nearly finished his breakfast by the time I joined him. There was even that faintly mischievous smile upon his cheerful face which always signaled that his mind was engaged upon something interesting. "You have a case on your hands, Holmes?" I asked. I have never doubted that the faculty of deduction is contagious. "Watson," said Holmes, "nothing can be kept from you now." "Yes, I do have a case." After a month spent on trifles and nonsense, I am at last setting out to break this spell of inactivity. Would you care to share it with me? There is very little to share at present. Still, if you wish, we may discuss the matter while eating the 2 over-boiled eggs which our new cook has seen fit to provide us this morning. The fault, I fear, must lie with the copy of Family Herald I noticed on the table yesterday. Even so small a matter as boiling an egg requires attention, Watson. One must keep track of the time, and that becomes impossible while reading the romantic tales of that admirable publication. 15 minutes later, we were seated opposite one another at the clear breakfast table. Holmes drew a letter from his pocket. "Do you know Neil Gibson, the Gold King?" he asked. "The American senator?" "The same. Once a senator from one of the western states, though he is better known as the greatest gold mine owner in the world." "Yes, I know the name. He must have lived in England at some time. It sounds very familiar." "Quite right. About 5 years ago, he purchased a considerable estate in Hampshire. You have doubtless heard of the tragic death of his wife." Of course. Now that you mention it, I remember. That must be why the name stayed with me, though I know nothing of the details. Holmes reached for the newspapers that lay upon a chair. I never expected this case to come into my hands, said he. Otherwise, I should have collected the relevant reports. The truth is that, sensational though the affair may be, there appeared to be nothing particularly difficult about it. The suspect's rather remarkable personality did nothing to obscure the evidence, which seemed perfectly clear. Both the judge and the jury formed the same impression at the outset. The trial is now to be held at Winchester. I fear I may be rowing against the current, Watson, for while I may discover the truth, I cannot alter it, unless some entirely new and wholly unexpected facts come to light. I see not the faintest glimmer of hope for my client. Your client, I repeated. Have I not told you? It seems my unfortunate habit of telling stories backwards has infected you as well. Read this, if you please. The letter he handed me was clearly written by a man accustomed to authority. It ran as follows. Claridge's Hotel, October 3rd. Mr. Sherlock Holmes, I cannot allow the most beautiful woman ever created by God to be sent to her death without doing everything in my power to save her. I cannot explain what has happened. Indeed, it is impossible even for me to attempt it. Yet I have not the slightest doubt that Miss Dunbar is innocent. You must already know what has happened. Indeed, there is scarcely a person in the country who does not. The entire nation has been shaken by the news, yet not a single voice has been raised in Miss Dunbar's defense. That injustice is what torments me most. The woman would not harm so much as an ant. I shall call upon you tomorrow at 10 o'clock. I trust you may discover some glimmer of hope to illuminate this profound darkness. Perhaps I possess a clue myself and am simply unaware of it. Whatever the case, all that I know, all that I possess, and even my very self are at your disposal. Only save her. If ever in your life you have cause to bring forth the full measure of your powers and abilities, I beg that it be for this case. Yours faithfully, G. Neil Gibson. After breakfast, Holmes slowly knocked the ashes from his pipe and began to refill it with deliberate care. There, said he, that is the gentleman I am expecting. As for the story itself, we have hardly the time to read every newspaper account. I shall therefore summarize the principal points for you. This man holds perhaps the greatest financial power in the world and, from all I gather, possesses a character both hard and ruthless. Of his wife, the unfortunate victim of this tragedy, I know only that she was somewhat advanced in years. Yet it was hardly fortunate for her that a remarkably beautiful governess had been engaged to oversee the education of her two young children. Those three form the central figures of the drama. The setting is an old and imposing mansion standing at the heart of an ancient estate. As for the tragedy itself, the man's wife was found late at night about 700 meters from the house. She was fully dressed, with a shawl over her shoulders. She had been shot in the head with a revolver. No weapon was found near her, nor was there any clue as to the identity of the killer. No weapon near the body. Watson, mark that carefully. The murder appears to have taken place late at night. The body was discovered around 11 o'clock by the gamekeeper. After the police and the doctor examined it, it was carried back to the house. Am I abbreviating the matter too much, or do you follow it? Everything is quite clear. But why do they suspect the governess? In the first place, there is some very definite evidence. A revolver of the same caliber as the bullet found in the victim's head was discovered at the bottom of the governess's wardrobe. Moreover, one of the chambers had been fired. Fixing his eyes upon me, he slowly repeated the words, syllable by syllable. At the bottom of the wardrobe. He then fell silent. It was evident that certain thoughts were passing through his mind, and I refrained from disturbing him with any foolish interruption. Suddenly, he gave a little start and returned to the present. "Yes, Watson, there was found. What do you say to that? Enough to accuse her, is it not? Both juries seem to think so. In addition, a note was discovered on the dead woman. The note summoned her to the very spot where she was found murdered, and it bore the governess's signature. What do you make of that? Finally, there is a motive for the crime. Senator Gibson is a striking man. If his wife were dead, who but the young governess, who, by all accounts, had long been the object of her employer's marked attention, would take her place? Love, wealth, power, all hanging upon the life of a middle-aged woman. An ugly business, Watson. Very ugly. Indeed it is. The governess could produce no witness to prove she was elsewhere at the time of the murder. On the contrary, she was forced to admit that she had been near Thor Bridge at the very hour when the crime was committed. She could not deny it, for a village woman passing by had seen her there. That seems to settle the matter. Not quite, Watson, not quite. This bridge, single-arched, with a parapet and a roadway, is the narrowest point across a long, deep stretch of water covered with reeds, known as Thor's Mere. The dead woman was found at the very entrance to the bridge. There, in outline, you have the affair. And unless I am mistaken, our client has arrived considerably before his appointed time. When Billy opened the door, he announced a name we had not expected in the least. The name Mr. Marlowe Bates was unfamiliar to both of us. The man who entered was thin and nervous. His eyes were full of fear, and his whole body seemed to twitch as he looked at us. He had the air of someone who did not know what to do with himself. From a medical standpoint, I could have said that he was on the verge of a nervous breakdown. "You appear agitated, Mr. Bates," said Holmes. "Pray sit down. I must warn you, however, that I cannot spare you much time, for I have an appointment at 11. "I know," the man said, breathing with difficulty. His words came in short, broken bursts. "Mr. Gibson is coming. He is my employer. I am the steward of the estate. He is a scoundrel, Mr. Holmes, the very devil himself." "Those are strong words, Mr. Bates. I must explain myself quickly, Mr. Holmes, for there is little time. I would not have him find me here for anything in the world. He may arrive at any moment. This was the only hour I could manage. His secretary, Mr. Ferguson, told me this morning that he had an appointment with you. You said you were his steward, did you not? I have already given notice. In 2 weeks, I shall be free of this accursed servitude. He is a difficult man, Mr. Holmes, difficult to describe. He uses his charitable works as a cloak for his villainy. The chief victim of that man was his dead wife. He treated her cruelly. Yes, sir, cruelly. I do not know how the poor lady met her death, but I am certain he made her life a misery. The lady was from the tropics, Brazilian by birth. No doubt you are aware of that. No, that detail had escaped me. She possessed all the qualities of a woman of the tropics. She was a daughter of the sun and of passion. She loved her husband with the deepest devotion a woman can give, but when the dazzling beauty she once possessed began to fade, nothing remained to bind him to her. We all loved that lady, and we hated him for what he did to her. But the man is exceedingly clever and cunning. You would do well to remember that. Do not be deceived by appearances. He has another side, one that is not easily seen. And now I must go. No, I must go at once. He will be here any moment. Casting a terrified glance at the clock, our strange visitor fled the room almost literally. After a brief silence, Holmes remarked, "Mr. Gibson's employees appear to be remarkably loyal. Still, it was a useful warning. Now all we have to do is wait for the gentleman himself to arrive." At the exact hour we expected, We heard rapid footsteps upon the stairs. A moment later, the famous millionaire stood in our sitting room. One glance at the man was enough for me to understand why the steward feared and disliked his employer, and equally why his rivals hated him. Had I been a sculptor asked to fashion a statue of a successful man with nerves of steel and a conscience of stone, I would have chosen Mr. Neil Gibson as my model. One might imagine him as an Abraham Lincoln devoted not to lofty ideals, but to very practical ambitions. His face seemed carved from granite, hard, relentless, and deeply lined, bearing the marks of many struggles. Beneath his heavy, overhanging brows, his gray eyes were cold, alert, and watchful as they surveyed Holmes and then myself in turn. When Holmes introduced me, the man gave a perfunctory bow for form's sake, then pulled a chair forward and seated himself beside Holmes with an air of command. He sat so close that his bony knees almost touched those of my friend. "Let me say at once that money is no object, Mr. Holmes," he began. "It would make no difference to me if I had to burn sacks of it to clear up this matter. The woman is innocent. She must be vindicated. You are the man who will do it. Name your price." "My professional fees are fixed," said Holmes coolly. "Except in those cases where I choose to charge nothing. I apply the same tariff to everyone. If dollars do not interest you, then consider your reputation. If you succeed in this matter, every newspaper in England and America will carry your name on its front page. Your fame will spread across 2 continents. Thank you, but I hardly think my reputation requires such assistance, Mr. Gibson. It may surprise you, but I am not a man who seeks publicity. What interests me is the case itself, rather than the fame it might bring. However, we are wasting time. Perhaps you would care to begin by telling the story. The newspapers have already given the main outline. I doubt I can add anything that would be of use to you, unless there is some point still in darkness which you think I might illuminate. Yes, there is in fact one matter I should like to understand. And what is that? What exactly was the nature of your relationship with Miss Dunbar?" The Gold King started violently and half rose from his chair, but he immediately mastered himself. "I assume you have the right to ask such a question, Mr. Holmes, and that you ask it as part of your duty." "We share the same assumption," said Holmes. "In that case, I assure you that our relationship was nothing more than that of employer and employee. I neither saw nor spoke a single word to the young lady except when she was with my children." Holmes rose to his feet. "I'm a very busy man, Mr. Gibson," said he. "I cannot waste my time on idle talk. Good day to you." Our visitor had also risen and now towered above Holmes with his massive frame. His eyes blazed with anger beneath his heavy brows, and color had risen in his pale cheeks. "What does this mean, Mr. Holmes? Are you abandoning the case?" "At the very least, I am abandoning you, Mr. Gibson. I think my words were sufficiently clear." "Yes, they were clear, but what lies behind them? Are you trying to increase your fee? Are you afraid to take the case? Or is it something else? I believe I deserve a plain answer." "I believe you do," said Holmes, "and I shall give you one. This case is already complicated enough. I cannot also contend with statements that are contrary to the truth. Do you mean to imply that I am lying?" As a matter of fact, I was attempting to be as polite as possible, but if you insist upon that word, I shall not object. I had also sprung to my feet, for the expression upon the millionaire's face boded ill. His large hand had clenched into a fist and was raised threateningly. Holmes, however, merely smiled with complete indifference and reached calmly for his pipe. "Pray do not make a scene, Mr. Gibson. After breakfast, I cannot endure even the smallest quarrel. A brisk morning walk would do you a great deal of good." The Gold King struggled to control his anger. It was truly remarkable how within a single minute he transformed himself from that fiery, furious man into one who appeared cold, proud, and impassive. As you wish. I have no intention of teaching you how to conduct your profession. I cannot force you to take a case you do not want. But you have not acted wisely this morning, Mr. Holmes. I have defeated stronger men than you. No one who has crossed me has ever profited by it. I have heard the same from many others, said Holmes with a smile. And yet, as you see, I am still here. Good day to you, Mr. Gibson. You still have much to learn. Our visitor left the house with a great clatter, while Holmes remained perfectly composed, smoking his pipe and gazing thoughtfully at the ceiling. Have you any theory, Watson? He asked at last. When I consider that this man appears capable of sweeping aside any obstacle in his path, and when I remember what that fellow Bates said, that his wife was one such obstacle, then I should think, you are right. I have come to the same conclusion. But what of the governess? What sort of relationship existed between them? And how did you discover it? A bluff, Watson, a bluff. There was a complete contradiction between the passionate, unusual style of the letter he wrote and the calm, controlled manner of the man himself. It suggested that he had a deep emotional involvement with the accused woman rather than with the victim. In order to reach the truth, we must fully understand the relationships between these three people. You saw how directly I attacked him and how coolly he bore it. Then I bluffed him by behaving as though I were absolutely certain of something about which, in reality, I only had strong suspicions. You think he will return? He must return. He cannot abandon the matter. Was that the bell? Yes, there are footsteps on the stairs. Indeed, Mr. Gibson, I was just telling Dr. Watson that you were somewhat late. When the Gold King entered again, he appeared considerably subdued. Though the anger in his eyes still showed the pain of wounded pride, he had clearly realized that he must endure certain things in order to achieve his purpose. I have reconsidered the matter, Mr. Holmes, and have decided that I was too hasty in judging your remarks. You have the right to know the full truth. On that point, I agree with you. However, I assure you that my relationship with Miss Dunbar has nothing to do with this case. That is for me to decide, is it not? Yes, I suppose it is. You're like a surgeon who wishes to learn all the symptoms before making a diagnosis. Exactly. Only a patient who hopes to deceive his doctor conceals the truth. You may be right, but you must admit that when a man is suddenly questioned about his relationship with a woman, he may feel some embarrassment, particularly when strong feelings are involved. There is, I think, a private region within every man's heart where he does not welcome uninvited guests. You enter that region rather abruptly. However, your purpose justifies the intrusion, since you are trying to save her. Very well, the doors are open. You may investigate as you please. What is it you want? The truth. The Gold King remained silent for a moment, as though arranging his thoughts. His deeply lined and sorrowful face seemed even more troubled. At least I shall tell you the essentials, Mr. Holmes, he began at last. There are certain things that are painful for me to say, so I will not go further into them than necessary. I met my wife in Brazil while searching for gold. Maria Pinto was the extraordinarily beautiful daughter of an official in Manaus. At that time, I was young and passionate. But even now, looking back with a cool and critical eye, I must admit that she possessed a rare and magnificent beauty. She also had a very rich temperament, unlike any American woman I have known. She was passionate, sincere, full of the qualities of the tropics, and somewhat unstable. In short, I fell in love with her and married her. After my love for her faded, which took years, I realized that we had absolutely nothing in common. My love had long since died. Had hers also died, things would have been much easier, but you know women. Nothing I did could cool her feelings. If I treated her harshly, even cruelly, as some say, it was because I wanted to destroy her love for me. I knew that if it died, or turned into hatred, life would become easier for both of us. Yet her feelings for me never changed in the slightest. 20 years ago, on the banks of the Amazon, she loved me deeply. And she loved me just as deeply in that English woodland where we later lived. Whatever I did, she remained devoted to me with the same passion. Then Miss Grace Dunbar appeared. She answered our advertisement and became governess to our 2 children. You may have seen her portrait in the newspapers. The whole world knows that she is a remarkably beautiful woman. Yes, I shall not pretend to be more moral than the rest of mankind. I will not claim that I could live under the same roof with such a woman, see her every day, and not feel passion for her. Can you blame me for that, Mr. Holmes? I cannot blame you for your feelings, said Holmes, but I can blame you for expressing them, because that young lady was, in a sense, under your protection. Perhaps you are right, said the millionaire, though his eyes flashed briefly with anger at the rebuke. I do not pretend to be better than I am. I have been a man who has always obtained what he wanted, but I wanted that woman to love me and to possess her more than I had ever wanted anything in my life. And I told her so. You did that, did you? When Holmes lost control of his emotions, he could appear extremely formidable. I told her that if it were possible, I would marry her, but that this was not within my power. I also told her that money would be no obstacle, and that I would spare no expense to make her happy and comfortable. How very generous, said Holmes dryly. Look here, Mr. Holmes. I came to ask you to find evidence, not to receive a moral lecture. If I take up this case at all, it is only for the sake of that young lady, said Holmes sternly. The accusations against her are serious enough without your attempt to ruin the life of a defenseless girl whom you were supposed to protect beneath your roof. You have already admitted your intentions. Some wealthy men like yourself must learn that bribing the entire world cannot excuse their crimes. To my great surprise, the Gold King accepted this rebuke with perfect composure. At this moment, I feel much the same way as you do. Thank God my plans did not succeed. Miss Dunbar rejected every offer I made and insisted upon leaving the house at once. Then why did she remain? In the first place, she was not supporting only herself with her salary. There were others dependent upon her. To lose her income would have meant abandoning them, and that was not easy. When I swore that I would never trouble her again, and I kept my word, she agreed to stay. But there was another reason. She knew the influence she had over me. No other force in the world could influence me as she did. She wished to use that influence for good. How so? She knew something about my business affairs. My operations are enormous, Mr. Holmes, far beyond the comprehension of ordinary men. I have the power to destroy as easily as to create, and I generally choose to destroy. I can ruin not only individuals, but communities, cities, even countries. Business is a hard game, and the weak are crushed. I play it well. I have never whined in my life, nor have I cared if others whined. But she looked at things differently, and perhaps she was right. She believed that a man's fortune, beyond what he needs for himself, should not be built upon the misery of 10,000 others deprived of their livelihood. That was her view. She thought money should be used for more lasting purposes. She realized that I listened to her, and she believed she was doing good in the world by influencing my actions. That is why she stayed. And then this tragedy occurred. Can you throw any light upon it? For a minute or more, the Gold King remained silent, his head buried in his hands. Everything is against her. I cannot deny that. Women live inward lives that sometimes lead them to actions beyond a man's reasoning. At first, I was so astonished that, in the shock of the moment, I was prepared to believe she had taken a course entirely contrary to her nature. An explanation did occur to me, and I will share it with you, Mr. Holmes. There is no doubt that my wife was an extremely jealous woman. There is the ordinary jealousy of possession, but there may also be a spiritual jealousy, and the latter can be just as maddening. My wife had no cause for ordinary jealousy, yet I believe she realized that this English girl could influence me. Miss Dunbar influenced my thoughts and actions, something my wife had never succeeded in doing. Even though that influence was for good, it meant nothing to her. Her hatred drove her almost mad, and the passionate blood of the Amazon always burned within her. She may have planned to kill Miss Dunbar, or perhaps merely to frighten her with a weapon and force her to leave the house. In a struggle that followed, the person holding the weapon may have been shot. That thought occurred to me as well, said Holmes. Indeed, apart from deliberate murder, it is the only reasonable explanation. But she absolutely denies it. That does not necessarily mean it is untrue, does it? A woman who has experienced such a terrible shock might run home with the revolver still in her hand. In her confusion, she might hide it among her clothes and, when the weapon was discovered, deny everything because she could not explain the circumstances. Is there anything to prevent such a hypothesis? Yes, Miss Dunbar herself. Perhaps so. Holmes glanced at his watch. We may be able to obtain the necessary permission today and take the evening train to Winchester, said he. After speaking with the young lady, I may be able to be of greater assistance to you. However, I must warn you that my conclusions may not be the ones you hope for. As the necessary official permissions were delayed, we decided not to travel to Winchester that day. Instead, we went to Thor Place, the Hampshire estate of Mr. Neil Gibson. Though he did not accompany us, he had given us the address of the local police officer, Coventry, who had been the first to examine the scene of the tragedy. Assistant Commissioner Coventry was a tall, thin man, so gaunt that he resembled someone on the verge of starvation. He possessed a mysterious air, giving the impression that he knew far more than he was prepared to say. He also had a curious habit of suddenly lowering his voice to a whisper, as though he were imparting some matter of the gravest importance, though what he actually said was usually quite ordinary. Aside from these peculiarities, however, he proved to be an honest and straightforward fellow. He was frank enough to admit that the matter exceeded his own abilities and that he would welcome assistance. "I would much rather have you than Scotland Yard, Mr. Holmes," said he. When Scotland Yard steps in, the reputation of the local police suffers, and we are blamed for failure. Whatever contribution we make to solving the case is conveniently overlooked. But I hear that you are a fair-minded man. Holmes's assurance that my name need not appear anywhere in the affair was enough to relieve our anxious friend. It will be quite sufficient for me if the case is solved, whether my name is mentioned or not. That is very generous of you. I also know that your friend Dr. Watson is just as trustworthy. Before we reach the scene, however, there is a question I should like to ask you. I have told this to no one else. From the way he glanced about him, it was clear that he was uneasy about uttering what he was about to say. Do you not think it possible that a case could be brought against Mr. Neil Gibson? The thought has crossed my mind. You have not yet seen Miss Dunbar, but she is a woman of the highest character in every respect. The man may have wished to rid himself of his wife. You know that Americans are far more accustomed to firearms than we are. It was his revolver, you know. Is that certain? Yes, sir. One a matched pair. A matched pair? Then where is the other? The man has a whole collection of weapons, but we have not been able to find a mate to that revolver, though the case it came from was clearly meant for two. If it was part of a pair, the other should certainly exist. We turned the whole house upside down, looking for weapons. You may go and see for yourself if you wish. Perhaps later. For the moment, let us go together to the place where the tragedy occurred. This conversation had taken place in the sitting room of Coventry's modest country cottage, which also served as the local police station. After walking for nearly a kilometer through wind-tossed shrubs and among faded ferns of bronze and gold, we reached one of the side gates that opened onto the grounds of Thor Place. Following a narrow path that ran between the pheasant preserves, we came to a clearing from which we could see the half-timbered mansion standing on the slope of the hill. It was a large building, half Tudor and half Georgian in style. Beside us stretched a long pond covered with reeds. At its narrow middle point, a stone bridge had been built, and the carriage road passed directly across it. On either side of the bridge, the water broadened again into the wider reaches of the mere. Our guide stopped at the entrance of the bridge and pointed to the ground with his finger. "This is where Mrs. Gibson's body was found." I marked the spot with a stone. "The body had not been moved when you arrived, I presume?" "No, sir. They sent for me at once." "Who sent for you?" "Mr. Gibson himself." As soon as the alarm was raised, he ran down from the house with the others and ordered that nothing should be touched until the police arrived. That was sensible. According to what I read in the newspapers, the shot was fired at close range. "Yes, sir, very close. Near the right temple. Just behind it, sir." "In what position was the body?" "She was lying on her back. There were no signs of a struggle or anything of the kind. No weapon was found either. The only thing was a short note written by Miss Dunbar, clenched in the dead woman's left hand." "You say her hand was clenched?" "Yes, sir. We had some difficulty opening her fingers." "That is a very important point. In that case, no one could have placed the note in her hand afterward to fabricate a false clue." "Good heavens! If I recall correctly, it was a very short note. I shall be at Thor Bridge tomorrow at 9. G. Dunbar. Is that right?" "Yes, sir." "Did Miss Dunbar admit that she wrote the note?" "Yes." "And what explanation did she give?" "She says she will reserve her defense for the court. For the moment she refuses to say anything." "A most interesting matter. That note is rather puzzling, is it not?" "As a matter of fact," said our guide, "if I may venture to say so, the note seems to me the clearest point in the whole case." Holmes shook his head. "If we assume the note to be genuine, it must have been written before the murder, perhaps an hour or two earlier. But why was the woman still clutching it tightly in her left hand? Why carry it so carefully? She would not have needed to consult it during their conversation. Do you not find that curious? Now that you put it that way, it does seem curious. I believe I must sit quietly for a few minutes and think it over." He seated himself upon the stone parapet of the bridge. I watched my friend's keen gray eyes moving restlessly about the scene with an air of deep suspicion. Suddenly, he sprang to his feet and ran to the opposite side of the bridge railing. Taking his magnifying glass from his pocket, he began examining the stones closely. "Interesting," said he. "Yes, sir. I noticed that mark on the parapet myself," said our guide. "It must have been made by someone passing by." The stones were gray, yet at that particular spot there was a whitish mark about the size of a coin. Upon closer inspection, it was clear that the mark had been caused by a violent blow. "It must have been struck with considerable force," said Holmes thoughtfully. He struck the parapet several times with his walking stick, but no mark appeared. "Yes, it must indeed have been a heavy blow. The position of the mark is also curious. The impact did not come from above downward, but rather from below upward, since it lies beneath the handrail of the parapet." "Yes, but it is at least 5 meters away from the body." "Quite true. Perhaps it has nothing to do with the case, yet it is still worth examining. There is nothing more to see here. There were no footprints, I suppose." "The ground was hard as stone, sir. There were no traces at all." "Then we may go. Let's first visit the house and take a look at those firearms you mentioned. After that we shall go on to Winchester, for before we push the investigation further, I must speak with Miss Dunbar." Mr. Neil Gibson had not yet returned from the town, but the nervous Mr. Bates, who had visited us earlier that morning, was in the house. With almost devilish pleasure, he began showing us the many varieties of firearms that his employer had collected during a life filled with adventurous exploits. As anyone who knows Mr. Gibson and his methods might easily imagine, he has enemies, said the man. He used to sleep with a loaded revolver in the drawer beside his bed. He's a savage man, sir. At times he inspires fear in all of us. I am certain the poor lady who was killed often lived in fear as well. Did you ever witness Mr. Gibson physically assault his wife? No, I cannot say that, but I have heard him speak harshly to her many times. He would sometimes use the most humiliating language, even in front of the servants. As we walked toward the station, Holmes remarked, "Our millionaire's private life appears to have been far from admirable." Yes, Watson, though we have gathered new information, we are still far from solution. It is quite clear that Mr. Bates bears his employer no affection. Yet according to his account, there is no doubt that Mr. Gibson was in the library when the alarm was raised. Dinner was served at 8:30, and up to that moment everything had proceeded normally. It is true that the alarm was given late, but the murder must certainly have been committed around the time mentioned in the note. There is no evidence that Mr. Gibson left the house again after returning from town at 5 o'clock. On the other hand, it appears that Miss Dunbar admits having arranged to meet Mrs. Gibson at the bridge. Beyond that, she says nothing, following the advice of her lawyer. I have several vital questions to ask this young lady, and I shall not feel at ease until I have spoken with her. I must confess that, apart from one single point, everything in this case appears to be against her. And what is that, Holmes? The revolver being found in her wardrobe. Come now, Holmes, I cried. If you ask me, that is the strongest evidence against her. No, Watson. Even during my first cursory reading of the case, that detail caught my attention. Now that I am examining the matter more closely, it is the one circumstance that gives me hope. Evidence must be consistent. We have sufficient reason to suspect trickery and deception. I cannot quite follow you. Very well, Watson. Imagine yourself for a moment in the position of a woman who intends to eliminate her rival by means of a cold-blooded murder. You plan the crime. You write a note, and the victim comes to the meeting place. You have your weapon ready. You commit the murder. Everything has been carried out with admirable skill. Now tell me, after accomplishing everything so cleverly, would you then spoil the whole affair by carefully carrying the weapon back home and placing it in the wardrobe, the very place people would naturally search first? Would you do such a thing when you could simply throw it into the reeds nearby and rid yourself of it forever? You may not be a master conspirator, but even you, Watson, would hardly commit such an absurd blunder. It might have happened in the confusion of the moment. No, Watson, that is impossible. If a murder is coolly planned, then the covering up of the evidence is also coolly planned. To my mind, there is a serious deception here, a deliberately planted piece of false evidence. But there are still many things that require explanation. Then we shall begin explaining them. When we change our perspective, what appears to be the strongest evidence against someone may become the most valuable clue leading to the truth. Let us consider the revolver, for example. Miss Dunbar insists she knew nothing about it. According to our new theory, she must be telling the truth. In that case, someone else must have placed the weapon in the wardrobe. And who would that person be? Someone who wished to throw suspicion upon Miss Dunbar. And could that person not also be the real murderer? You see, we're already beginning to reach certain conclusions in our investigation. As the official formalities had not yet been completed, we were obliged to spend the night in Winchester. The following morning, we were granted permission to see the young lady in her cell on the condition that the rising young barrister Joyce Cummings accompanied us. After hearing so much about her, I had expected to see a beautiful woman, but I shall never forget the impression Miss Dunbar made upon me the moment I saw her. It was no wonder that even that powerful millionaire had found himself powerless before the strength of this woman. Her face, with its finely drawn features, seemed at once strong and delicate. One could instantly perceive that, though she might be capable of impulsive action, she possessed a noble character that always inclined toward what was right. She was tall, dark, and carried herself with dignity and authority. Yet when one looked into her dark eyes, one could see the helpless desperation of someone trapped in a net from which there seemed no escape. The presence and support of the famous detective had brought a faint color back to her pale cheeks, and in the eyes she turned toward us there now shone a glimmer of hope. "Mr. Neil Gibson has told you about what passed between us, I suppose?" she asked in a low but eager voice. "Yes," said Holmes. "There is no need for you to torture yourself by revisiting that part of the story. After seeing you, I am convinced, as Mr. Gibson said, that you had influence over him and that the relationship between you is innocent. But why did you not explain all this in court? The accusation against me seemed almost like a cruel joke. I believed that if we waited, the truth would emerge naturally, and there would be no need to speak of distressing matters concerning the family's private life. But now I see that the affair is becoming more serious instead of clearer." "My dear young lady," said Holmes kindly, "I do not wish you to nourish false hopes. Your counsel, Mr. Cummings, can tell you that at present all the cards are against us, and that we must do everything possible if we are to win. It would be a grave mistake to behave as though you were not in the gravest danger. Help me as far as you can, so that we may uncover the truth. I shall hide nothing. Then begin by telling me the true nature of your relationship with Mrs. Gibson." "She hated me, Mr. Holmes. She hated me with all the fiery intensity of the tropics. For her, there was no middle ground. She loved her husband with all her heart, and she hated me just as much. She had almost certainly misunderstood the nature of our relationship. I do not wish to wrong her, but she was so deeply in love with her husband in a physical sense that she could never understand the intellectual, even spiritual, bond that existed between him and me. She could not understand that the only reason I remained in that house was to ensure that the power her husband possessed might be used for good. Of course, there is no justification for staying where one causes unhappiness, but it is also certain that even if I had left, the unhappiness would not have ended." "Miss Dunbar," said Holmes, "I should like you to describe exactly what happened that night. I can tell you everything I know, Mr. Holmes, but I cannot prove any of it. There are certain points, the most vital points, that I cannot explain, nor even imagine an explanation for. If you tell us what happened, perhaps others may find the explanation. If you ask why I was at Thor Bridge that night, it was because I received a note from Mrs. Gibson that morning. It was lying upon the desk in the room we used as a classroom. She may have placed it there herself. In the note, she asked me to meet her at Thor Bridge after dinner and said she had something important to tell me. She also asked that I leave my reply upon the sundial in the garden, because she did not wish anyone else to know of the matter. I could not understand why such secrecy was necessary, but I did as she requested and accepted the meeting. The note also instructed me to destroy it after reading it, so I burned it in the classroom fireplace. Mrs. Gibson was very much afraid of her husband. I had witnessed his harsh treatment of her many times and had reproached him for it. I assumed she wished to keep the meeting secret because she feared him. No other explanation occurred to me. Yet she carefully kept the reply you wrote? Yes. I was very surprised when I learned that my note had been found in her hand. What happened afterward? I went to the bridge at the appointed hour. When I arrived, Mrs. Gibson was already there waiting for me. Until that moment, I had no idea how deeply she hated me. She seemed almost mad. Indeed, perhaps she truly was mad, but had managed to conceal it until then. Otherwise, how could we have faced each other day after day while her heart was filled with such hatred for me? I cannot repeat the things she said to me. She poured out all her bitterness and hatred in the most dreadful language. I did not answer her. I could not. She became terrifying to look at. At last I stopped my ears and fled. She remained standing at the entrance of the bridge, still shouting curses after me. She was standing near the place where her body was later found, a meter or two beyond it. If she was killed shortly after you left, did you not hear the sound of a gunshot? No, I heard nothing. I had been so shaken and frightened by her outburst that I ran straight toward my room to recover myself. I was in no state to notice anything that might have happened. You said you returned to your room. Did you leave it again before morning? Yes. When I heard that the poor lady had been killed, I rushed out with everyone else toward the bridge. Did you see Mr. Gibson there? Yes. When I saw him, he had just come from the bridge. He had already sent for the doctor and the police. Did he appear disturbed? Mr. Gibson is an extremely strong and self-controlled man. He rarely shows emotion. But as someone who knows him well, I could see that he was greatly agitated. And now we come to the most important point. The revolver was found in your room. Had you ever seen that weapon before? Never. I swear it. When was it discovered? The next morning, when the police searched the house. Among your clothes? Yes, beneath my clothes in the wardrobe. Have you any idea how long it had been there? I know that it was not there the previous morning. How can you be certain? Because I had tidied my wardrobe. Then someone must have entered your room and placed the revolver there in order to throw suspicion upon you. That must be the case. When could that have happened? Only during dinner, or while I was in the classroom with the children. You were in the classroom when you received the note, were you not? Yes, and I did not leave until noon. Thank you, Miss Dunbar. Is there anything else you can think of that might assist my investigation? I cannot think of anything. There was a mark of violence upon the bridge parapet, a very fresh mark directly opposite the place where the body was found. Can you explain it? It must be a coincidence. Curious, Miss Dunbar, very curious. Why should such a mark appear at the very time and place of the murder? But how could such a mark have been made? It could only have been caused by a violent blow. Holmes made no reply. His pale, inquisitive face suddenly grew tense, and his gaze drifted far away. Knowing him as I did, I recognized this as one of those moments when his genius was at work. His mind was so evidently in the grip of a crisis that none of us dared utter a single word. Together with the lawyer, we stood watching Holmes, who remained silent and lost in thought beside the prisoner. Suddenly, he sprang to his feet. He was taut with excitement, trembling with a surge of energy. He seemed filled with an overwhelming urge to act at once. "Come, Watson, come," he cried. "What is it, Holmes?" "Never mind for the moment, madam. I shall inform you, Mr. Cummings. With the help of the goddess of justice, you will have a case that will echo throughout all England. You shall have a news tomorrow, Miss Dunbar. Until then, be assured that the dark clouds are slowly dispersing and the sun of truth is about to appear." The distance between Winchester and Thor Place was already considerable, but my impatience made it seem far longer than it actually was. Holmes, however, was even worse than I, and I suspect he felt as though the journey would never end. He was so tense and restless that he could not keep still, now pacing back and forth inside the compartment, now tapping the cushions beside him with his long, delicate fingers. We were nearing the station where we were to disembark when he suddenly sat down opposite me. We had secured a first-class compartment and placed both hands upon my knees, looking into my eyes with that mischievous expression which always appeared when he was in the mood of a playful boy. "Watson," said he, "if I remember correctly, you usually bring a weapon with you on excursions like this." It was very much in Holmes's own interest that I did so, for when his mind was absorbed in a problem, he gave little thought to his personal safety. On several occasions, my revolver had proved most useful. I reminded him of this fact. Yes, I know I can be somewhat forgetful in such matters. You have it with you now, I suppose." I drew my small but effective revolver from the pocket of my trousers and handed it to him. Opening the chamber, he removed the cartridges and began examining the weapon with great care. "Heavy, quite heavy," said Holmes. "Yes, it is a solid piece." For about a minute, he stared thoughtfully at the revolver. "You know, Watson," he said at last, "I believe your revolver is very closely connected with the solution of the case we are investigating." "You must be joking, Holmes." "No, Watson, I am perfectly serious. We're going to conduct a test. If the result is positive, everything will be explained, and the test depends upon the action of this little weapon. Let us remove one cartridge and replace the other 5, then close the safety. Yes. Now, it is even heavier and even more similar. I had not the faintest idea what thoughts were passing through Holmes's mind, nor did he offer me any explanation. He remained silent all the way until we stepped off the train at the small Hampshire station. We climbed into a rickety horse-drawn carriage and within 15 minutes arrived at the home of our reliable friend, the assistant commissioner. "Have you found a clue, Mr. Holmes?" "What is it?" "Everything depends upon how Dr. Watson's revolver behaves," said Holmes. "Here it is. Could you lend me a length of rope, about 10 meters?" We obtained a coil from the village grocer. "I believe this will do very well," said Holmes. "Now, if you please, we may begin what I hope will be the final journey of this case." The sun was setting over the rolling moors of Hampshire, casting a magnificent autumn glow across the landscape. The assistant commissioner walked beside us, glancing at Holmes with a doubtful expression, as though questioning his sanity. As we approached the scene of the murder, I could tell that beneath Holmes's usual calm exterior, he was in fact deeply excited. "Yes," he said, "you have seen me miss the mark before, Watson. My instincts sometimes mislead me. When the idea first occurred to me in that cell at Winchester, I felt certain of it. Yet one of the disadvantages of a quick mind is that it constantly produces new explanations and sometimes follows the wrong trail. Still, we must try, Watson." As we walked, he had tied one end of the cord firmly around the butt of the revolver. We had now reached the very spot where the tragedy had occurred. With the help of our guide, the assistant commissioner carefully identified the exact place where the body had been found. Holmes then wandered among the bushes and faded ferns in search of a large stone. At last he found one that suited his purpose. He tied the stone securely to the free end of the cord and lowered it over the parapet. The stone hung swinging just above the surface of the water. He then stepped to the point a little beyond the entrance of the bridge where the woman's body had been discovered. My revolver was in his hand. The cord was drawn tight between the weapon at one end and the heavy stone at the other. "Now," he cried. At that very instant, he raised the revolver to the level of his head and released it. The weight of the stone instantly dragged the weapon downward. It struck violently against the parapet and then plunged into the water. Hardly had the revolver disappeared beneath the surface when Holmes, crouching beside the railing, gave a cry of triumph. It was clear that he had found what he had been seeking. "Could there be clearer proof than this?" he exclaimed. "Did you see, Watson? Your revolver has solved the matter." As he spoke, he pointed to a second mark beneath the handrail of the parapet. This mark was identical in shape and size to the first. Rising, he saw the astonished expression upon the assistant commissioner's face. "We shall spend the night at the inn," said Holmes calmly. "You will easily recover my friend's revolver with the help of a hook. In the same place you will also find another revolver, the one which that vindictive woman tied to a stone and cast into the water in order to conceal her own crime and lay the charge of murder upon an innocent person. You may inform Mr. Gibson that I shall see him tomorrow. You may also tell him that tomorrow we shall take the necessary steps to prove Miss Dunbar's innocence." That night, as we sat opposite one another in the village and smoking our pipes, Holmes summarized the affair for me. "I fear you will not be able to add the mysterious case of Thor Bridge to your collection in a manner that will greatly enhance my reputation, Watson. In this instance, I failed to think with the speed that the situation demanded. I did not blend imagination with fact as skillfully as my art requires. I must confess that the mark upon the parapet was sufficient in itself to suggest the true solution of the case, and I reproach myself for having arrived at that solution so late. Still, one must admit that the unhappy woman's mind worked in a subtle and cunning manner, and the plot she devised was not an easy one to unravel. In all our adventures, I cannot recall another case where a diseased and obsessive love led to such extraordinary consequences. It appears that, in Mrs. Gibson's eyes, the mere fact that Miss Dunbar rivaled her, whether physically or intellectually, was an unforgivable offense. There can be little doubt that she attributed her husband's coarse words and harsh treatment, which he used in an attempt to alienate her affections, to the innocent young woman. The lady had resolved to end her own life, but in doing so she wished to inflict upon her rival a punishment worse than death. We can now reconstruct the events step by step. There is no doubt that everything had been planned with great cunning and malice. She induced Miss Dunbar to write a note. Thanks to that stratagem, it would appear that it was Miss Dunbar who had requested the meeting at the scene of the crime. Because she wished the note to be discovered, she exaggerated the matter by keeping it clenched in her hand until the very end. Even that fact alone should have awakened my suspicions much earlier. She then took one of her husband's revolvers. As you saw yourself, the house was practically an arsenal and kept it hidden for use. The matching revolver she fired once in the nearby woods so that its chamber would appear to have been used, and then placed it in Miss Dunbar's wardrobe. Afterwards, she went to the bridge, where she devised a most ingenious mechanism to rid herself of the weapon she intended to use. When Miss Dunbar arrived at the meeting place, the woman poured out her hatred with the few breaths she had left. Once Miss Dunbar had fled far enough away not to hear the shot, she carried out her terrible purpose. As you see, every link now fits neatly into place, and the chain is complete. The newspapers may ask why the mirror was not dragged at the beginning, but it is always easy to be wise after the event. If one does not know precisely what one is searching for, or where, it is no easy matter to search such a wide area covered with reeds. Yes, Watson, we have helped an extraordinary woman and a relentless man. And if in the future they should unite their forces, which does not seem unlikely, the financial world may discover that Mr. Gibson has learned something in the hard school of life through which he has passed.